Hello everyone, this is part 65 of What If Naruto Meets the Nine Tails Early, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist. To see more, comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Sasuke Uchiha let out a held breath as he stepped through the door into the council chambers of Konoha. Today was the day where he began one of his ambitions, the revival of the Uchiha clan. As of now, the Uchiha clan was in his hands. It was today where he would become the official clan head of the Uchiha, regardless of the fact that the clan numbered only himself. No longer would the Uchiha clan's voice be heard from the clan's advocate, Shimura Danzo, who had been named as the Uchiha's speaker should no Uchiha be able to represent the clan in the council. Since Sasuke was too young to take up the Uchiha seat on the council, he had to sit by as Danzo cast the votes for the clan. Sasuke had been told about the man by Kakashi during his time training under the Copy Ninja, and based on the rumors surrounding the man, Sasuke was glad the Uchiha's vote would no longer be in the hands of a man who was using it for his own good. The first thing we was doing was naming a new person to represent him should he ever be absent. When the doors to the chamber were opened, Sasuke saw that the council chamber was a circular room with 21 seats lined around the room, 10 for the Shinobi Council, 10 for the Civilian Council, and 1 for the Hokage, who just so happened to hold a spot on the Shinobi Council as well. As Sasuke stepped into the chambers, he noticed most of the Shinobi Council present, and only one member of the Civilian Council present, and gave them all a respectful bow, earning greetings back from those who were currently there. Shortly after, the newest addition of Konoha's council took his seat in between the Senju clan head and the Hyuga clan head. "Don't look so tense, Sasuke. We don't bite," called out Kazashi from the other side of the circular room, before pointing at Chum. "Well, most of us don't anyways. TSK. Please. I sharpened mine and Kuromaru's fangs specifically for those idiot colleagues of yours, Kazashi, and I don't plan on dulling them on anyone currently here right now," replied Chum. Kazashi let out a slight chuckle. Sasuke just sent him a curious glance. Was this how council meetings typically started off? "Don't look so confused," said Hiashi. "You've got to appear strong and collected or else they will tear you apart." "They?" asked Sasuke. "He's referring to the Civilian Council," spoke Inoiki. "A troublesome bunch of ravenous power-hungry beasts," said Shikaku before letting out a yawn and promptly falling asleep. Sasuke once again shot a questioning look to the napping Shikaku. "Just take a moment to relax and don't let it get to you," said Asuma, the current head of the Sarutobi clan. "You've got some time." "But wasn't the meeting supposed to start already?" asked Sasuke. "The Civilian Council is almost as bad as Kakashi when it comes to showing up on time," said Asuma. "The nerve of them, thinking that we revolve around them. We've been able to get more done in the past 2 years than my father was able to, but pulling those giant sticks out of their is something we still have failed miserably at. Out of them, Kazashi's the only one who's earned my respect." Sasuke let out a groan. If he had known that they would be waiting, he'd have brought his newest present. Flashback. Oi team. Sasuke was walking through the village, on his way to the administrative buildings in the village to claim his position as the Uchiha clan head. Hearing his name called out, he turned around to see the only one in the village who would openly call him team. "What are you doing here, Dobe?" "Figured you'd be guzzling down a bowl of breakfast ramen," responded Sasuke. "Was on my way there right now," replied Naruto. "But seeing as you're going to be busy until the party later tonight, I figured I'd give you this now." Naruto pulled out a small wrapped present and handed it to Sasuke. "Believe me, neither of us want Sakura to see you get that." Sasuke raised an eyebrow, but based on the size of the package, he knew immediately what was inside. Quickly opening the package, his suspicions were confirmed when he now held a small green book ended Ika Tactics, Special Limited Edition. "Is this?" "Yep. The Special Limited Edition, complete with 5 bonus scenes and autographed by one of the book's authors," grinned Naruto. On the outside cover of the book was the signature of the one and only Toad Sage, and infamous super pervert. Suddenly, something Naruto said piqued his interests. "One of the authors." Naruto began sweating as he realized he let that one slip. Sasuke continued to stare down the sweating blonde until he finally gave in. Well, Ero Sennin is as old as Barkan. Someone's going to have to carry on the Ika mantle someday. That actually explains some of the style differences between the ending and the rest of the story in the last Ika, said Sasuke. Was it really that noticeable? Naruto as he realized he found his first critic. Yeah, replied Sasuke. Naruto sighed. I mean the story itself was good, but the ending was something else. So I see Jiraiya let you write the beginnings of the story, but finished it up himself. Wait, I wrote the ending, realized Naruto. You? Asked a surprised Sasuke. Come on Dobe. I'll give it to you that you could potentially write a few chapters, but the ending. Give me a break. No, I'm serious, defended Naruto. I was trying to get Ero Sennin to train me, but he wouldn't until he finished his story, so I kind of wrote the last few chapters so that he'd get around to training me. Well, gotta go. Hinata-chan wanted to get brunch. Sasuke just stood there, dumbfounded at the possibility that Naruto was actually a co-author of Ika. End flashback. I see we have a new face on the council, said Takamo Ichira, one of the civilian council members as the remainder of the council took their seats and the meeting began. He looked over towards Sasuke. Tsunade stood up to call the meeting to order. As you are all aware, Uchiha Sasuke is now of age to take up the mantle of the Uchiha clan head. As such, the Uchiha clan will now be represented by him instead of the Uchiha clan's advocate, Shimura Danzo. Tsunade sent a glare over towards the old warhawk. Today was a big step forward for her and her allies now that Danzo's direct voice on the council had been reduced by half. As an elder advisor, he already had a vote on the council, but also having control of the Uchiha's vote gave him about as big a say on the council as Tsunade herself, who held the Senju's and Hokage's vote. With the addition of Kazashi to the council, Tsunade had enough support to keep the civilian council, and by extent Danzo, from gaining more power, and with a few members of the Shinobi Council pulling a few strings, she would be able to get a few of the civilian council members to vote in her favor in order to pass some form of legislation that would shift the balance of power in the village back towards her favor. Now with the addition of Sasuke to the council, she and the Shinobi Council had a slight majority over the council. With this majority, she wouldn't have any problems passing most legislation and further restricting the civilian council's influence. I believe now would be a perfect time to discuss the resurrection of the Uchiha clan, spoke Rukika Hatika, one of the civilian council members. Uchiha-sama, are you aware that since you are now of age, you are allowed to invoke the Clan Restoration Act? I am aware of the CRA, spoke Sasuke, a slight hint of annoyance in his voice. Sadly, he had expected this. The civilian council had been building up to this moment for years, hoping that when he decided to enact the CRA, he would choose their daughters as his wives, further cementing their influence in Konoha's government. Ever since the academy days following that night, the civilian council had been pressuring the daughters to get closer to him in hopes that he would accept their advances. This in turn resulted in the founding of the one thing he hated most, even more so than Itachi, the Sasuke Uchiha fan club. Of course, both Sakura and Ino had been a part of that embarrassment of a social group, despite not being coaxed by their parents to pursue his affections. But eventually the two of them came to their senses and Sakura became the type of girl that he actually wanted to be with. She became someone who took the duties as a kunoichi seriously, becoming strong in the process. Once her fangirl persona disappeared, she wasn't afraid to speak her own opinion around the Uchiha heir. Lastly, despite her temper, she did have a caring side to her. And for whatever reason, he fell for her. Unfortunately for everyone's sanity, another member of the civilian council spoke up. Wonderful. I recommend we proceed with the restoration right away. Cheered Takamo Ichira, another civilian. In fact, I've got a daughter who would be more than happy to accept you with the task of restoring the Sharingan to Konoha. And I know my daughter Amy would be glad to help, spoke up another counselor. The responses from the remainder of the civilian council, minus Kazashi, were the same, and Sasuke's eye was twitching uncontrollably right now. Sasuke, Kazashi spoke up. I've gotten to know you a bit better over the past few years and I trust that you'll make the correct choice regarding the future of your clan. However, with that being said, I won't have my daughter being a part of something as ridiculous as this Clan Restoration Act. I can see what the Shodaime was thinking when he created the act. Shinobi clans were seeking out refuge from constant fighting by joining the village, and some of those clans were suffering the effects of constant war, but that was a century ago. What happened to your clan was a travesty, and I know I'm not alone on that thought, but I recommend you think carefully on what you feel must be done for your clan. Shame you're not willing to join us on this, Kazashi, spoke another civilian. If I understand correctly, your daughter and Uchiha-sama are rather close. I would hate to have to face her with the news that she would have to terminate her relationship. With Kazashi out, that'll mean more for me when Sasuke chooses to enact the CRA, was the common thought going throughout the civilian council. Well, Uchiha-sama, what is your choice? Asked the elder Koharu. Elder Utatane. Enacting the CRA should be a carefully made decision, spoke Tsunade. I would strongly recommend, if Uchiha-san were to do such a thing, that he takes his time. Like Naruto, who had already convinced himself that he would not be enacting the CRA, Sasuke had been informed of the act a few months before today. Nonsense, Tsunade, argued Homaru. We need to ensure the continuation of the Sharingan, and I recommend we start right away. In fact, if we begin today, we can ensure an heir to the Sharingan within a year's time. Right now, the table Sasuke was seated at was appearing rather attractive to his forehead as the councillors discussed his future like he was nothing more than a breeding pig. Now Uchiha-sama, if you'll just sign this doent, we can begin the restoration of your clan immediately, said Koharu as she passed Sasuke an official scroll. Sasuke took one look at the scroll in front of him before looking up towards the grinning civilian council. The only one on that side of the chamber who was not sharing the same look as his colleagues was Kazashi. He knew Sasuke better than anyone on his side of the council, and while he was confident that Sasuke would make the right choice here, there was always a small chance that the Uchiha head wouldn't. Sasuke moved to pick up the scroll in front of him, grabbing at it. However, instead of looking at it, and eventually signing it, like the civilian council wanted, Sasuke threw the scroll into the middle of the room and gave it a different kind of mark. Kaiten, Great Fireball Jutsu. The fireball engulfed the scroll in the middle of the room, and the stoic Hiashi was having trouble containing his amusement at the fish-like faces of the gasping civilian council. The doent to initiate the CRA being burnt to ash was not something the civilian council was hoping for. I've had enough of you fools trying to swindle what you can from my clan. For years I've had to sit by as you tried to run my life in hopes that today I'd return the favor. I didn't want any help from you, and most of the decisions you tried to make for me were for the good of yourselves rather than for me, my clan, or the village, glared Sasuke at the civilians. So long as the Uchiha clan is under my control, you won't see any favors from my pocket. But what about the continuation of the Sharingan? Cried out Koharu. Whether the Sharingan takes one generation or many to restore it to its former glory is not of your concern. Sasuke then turned his attention towards the old warhawk. You claim to have been casting your vote in the interest of the Uchiha clan. I've seen your voting record, and I can say that your voice is anything but beneficial to Konoha. I am revoking your right to advocating the Uchiha's voice in my absence. From now on, Haruno Kazashi will be my voice should I be absent from the council, and should he be absent himself, I give Uzumaki Naruto the right to cast my vote. That did it. The betrayal the civilian council felt was enough to send the unusually civil council meeting on the verge of war. Not only had Sasuke denied the CRA, but he had even given the demon brat a chance at having a say on the council. Danzo just looked at the Uchiha head as he would anyone else. On the outside, he remained neutral, but on the inside, he was seething at the youngest member of the council. He had hoped Sasuke would be easy to manipulate after today, but it appeared as if that would not be the case. And now, with his voice on the council being reduced to a single vote and the signs pointing towards Sasuke siding with Tsunade, the current Hokage and her allies now held a majority vote on the council. Tsunade couldn't help but smirk at the old warhawk. Today was a huge step towards her regaining total control of Konoha's political affairs. While her predecessor and sensei had been Hokage, the only thing keeping the civilian council under control for the last few years of the Sandaim's reign was the Konoha Charter. In order to make changes to the charter, a 75% majority vote was required along with the approval of the Hokage, or a unanimous vote by the council, which would be enough to overrule the Hokage's veto. Danzo's side had never attained that level of power thankfully, But during the later years of the Sandaim's reign, the Civilian Council had enough power to pass legislation that undermined Konoha. Once Tsunade took office, they was able to keep the Civilian Council at bay and maybe pass something that would reclaim a bit of the lost powers the Shinobi Council had, but now with Sasuke taking away Danzo's second vote, she had a slight majority and enough say to pass more legislation through the council. What it also ensured was that the Uzumaki clan would be able to take up its claim in Konoha in a few months once Naruto turned 16. With the majority in her favor, the Civilian Council wouldn't be able to deny the demon a seat on the council, further increasing the power of her and the Shinobi Council. Oh, the next few months would be interesting indeed. The meeting proceeded as normal as any other council meeting would go, Tsunade trying to get stuff done, Chum and Unkai arguing, the Civilian Council ranting about how much of a nuisance Naruto is, Tsunade nearly bashing some skulls of said councillors, and both sides of the council wanting to kill one another by the end of the meeting. Sasuke, Kazashi called out in the halls leading away from the council chamber. Sasuke stopped and turned to the elder Haruno. So how was your first day on the council? Is that how they all go? Groaned Sasuke. Oh, they're not that bad, chuckled Kazashi. Sasuke sent a questioning look to the pink-haired man. What? I'm serious. Tsunade-sama didn't send anyone to the hospital today. This actually managed to put a slight smile on the Uchiha's face. Haruno-san, can I ask you an honest question? Sasuke said, taking on a more serious attitude. Huh, yeah sure. Did you or your wife ever get Sakura to try and come after me because of my heritage? Asked Sasuke. Like how the rest of the Civilian Council did. First, please don't associate me with those animals, said Kazashi. Second, we knew about our daughter's crush on you those years ago. But never had we coaxed her to get together with you to try and get to your clan's power and influence in Konoha. I'll be entirely honest, I even tried to steer her away from you back in the academy. Really? Sasuke seemed taken aback by this. That obsession she had with you back then wasn't something a potential shinobi should have. Back then, you were a distraction to her, and if she wanted to be a shinobi, I wanted her to take her studies and training seriously, replied Kazashi. I know how cruel that life can be. I've watched numerous comrades of mine in the war, and to a young kunoichi like my daughter, I know what sort of fates could potentially await her as a kunoichi. You don't have to worry about that. I won't anything like that happen to her, declared Sasuke. I know, and I trust you to look after her, said Kazashi. But there will be times when the two of you are assigned to different missions or separate teams and you won't be there to help her. That's why she needs to be strong. She needs to be able to look after not only herself, but also her comrades she's assigned to work with. Back in her academy days, she wasn't taking her training seriously, and there were times where I blamed you for that. I know it wasn't your fault, rather her obsession of you, but I still couldn't get through to her that she needed to take being a shinobi more seriously. And it wasn't until that one mission where she finally realized that. You mean the one where? Yes. As a father, seeing your daughter come back to the village on the brink of death is the last thing you want to see, said Kazashi. I'm glad she finally took to being a kunoichi seriously, but I didn't want it to be like that. Sasuke was silent. Anyways, I'll be going now. Mebuki doesn't like it when I'm late for dinner, said Kazashi. Besides, don't you some celebrating to do tonight? Barbecue, later that evening. Kanpai. The sound of cheers and clanging glasses echoed throughout the restaurant as friends gathered to celebrate a momentous occasion for one of their own. Tonight was the night where the Konoha 16 was celebrating Sasuke's birthday. Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, Kiba, Hinata, Shino, Neji, Lee, Tenten, Shikamaru, Ino, Chuji, Haku, Yakumo, Fu, and even Sai all toasted the glasses of sake to celebrate the occasion. The first thing was for everyone to give Sasuke the gifts and presents for the occasion, except for Naruto, as he had already given Sasuke his. Most of the gifts consisted of ninja equipment, although Hinata and Neji had given him a formal kimono that was black with a dark red trim and the Uchiha clan symbol on the back of the haori and the sash on behalf of the Hyuga clan. It was a symbol that some of the Hyuga clan was looking to put the rivalry between the two dojutsu-wielding clans behind them, although everyone knew there were those in the Hyuga clan who would always look down upon the Uchiha and the Sharingan as inferior, aka Hyuga elders. Chuji had given Sasuke a number of vouchers to the very restaurant where they were currently celebrating at. Sakura told Sasuke that he would get his presents from her at a later time. And Sai, well. Sasuke's eye twitched for what felt like the 100th time that day as he opened the package in front of him to reveal a box of condoms, extra small. A few of the guys present proceeded to laugh at what Sai was trying to imply while Sasuke shot a death glare towards the smiling pale boy. Sakura had a slight blush on her face at a few other implications behind the present, but inner Sakura had other things to say. TSK, like Sasuke-kun would even be able to fit in those. I'll bet you bought them for yourself and found they were too big for you. What? I had read that this was an appropriate gift for a male around your age, said Sai. Besides, I'm just trying to help ensure you pass on your genes to the correct mate. You wouldn't want ugly to bear the heir to your clan, would you? SHANAROO. Sai soon found himself thrown through the walls of the restaurant by a fuming Sakura. It took about a half hour and a few bottles of sake to calm Sakura down and for Sai to regain consciousness. In that time, much to a certain Akamaki's delight, the food was served, and by the time a few of the waitresses carried in a large cake, everyone had settled down and the party was fun again. The rest of the night seemed like it would be going smoothly, that is until the top of the cake exploded to reveal 4 Sakuras. The Sakuras leapt forward and wrapped themselves around Sasuke. Happy birthday Sasuke-kun, they said seductively as Sasuke was immediately thrown back by the gusher of bee coming out of his nose. By now, the blush on Sakura's face was bright enough to compete with the ones that only a certain Hyuga could produce. Sakura's temper soon ignited and she threw the doppelgangers of her unconscious boyfriend as the 4 Sakuras puffed back into none other than Konohamaru, Mogi, Udon, and what came as a shock to everyone present as the 4th Sakura turned out to be Hanabi. Hinata just gasped at how her little sister could have resorted to using such a perverted jutsu like that as Sakura proceeded to chase the 4 panicking genin out of the restaurant, knocking over a few waitresses in the process. "Oh Naruto," called out a sweet voice that more often than not preceded someone's impending doom. Naruto turned around to see a dark aura surrounding Hinata. Why does Hanabi know that jutsu? Naruto began to panic and mentally curse Konohamaru. He had not taught Hanabi the jutsu, meaning that Konohamaru was likely the one who did. To only make things worse, Kurama began to freak out as Hinata's hair began to rise in what appeared to be 9 separate strands of hair that vaguely resembled foxtails. Naruto was also certain he could see a hint of red in Hinata's normally blue hair. Run for your life Naruto. It's the bee habanero. It was another half hour before Sakura returned and the apprentice of Tsunade was desperately in need of a drink. Unfortunately, the bottles of sake on the table were empty. Sakura turned to the 3 in charge of the drinks for the night and Naruto figured it was time for the fire sake. Whoa! Gasped Kiba as Naruto opened one of his 7 remaining bottles of Mount Myoboku fire sake. I can just feel myself getting drunk off just smelling that stuff. Naruto, is this what I think it is? Gasped Sakura. She had tasted the sake once when Tsunade was drinking the bottle Naruto had given her as an apology and she knew the potency of the stuff. Naruto nodded. Why would you be stupid enough to bring that here? Do you know just how strong that stuff is? Once again, Naruto just grinned and nodded as Sakura stared her blonde teammate down. I just thought that since Team's been handling the liquor fine so far, that he would like a little bit more of a challenge, said Naruto, issuing the challenge. No one had gotten drunk that night yet, with Yakumo and Hinata being the 2 who were the furthest along. Both were feeling slightly tipsy, yet still sober enough to function normally. The furthest away from being drunk was obviously Lee, as no one wanted to find out the destructive power the young Sukin, Drunken Fist, master was capable of. Everyone had been sure to keep the alcohol far away from Lee. You really think that 1 bottle is too much for me, Dobe? Responded Sasuke. Sakura sighed. She knew there was no stopping those 2 now. The only thing she could do was join them. 3 glasses of the fire sake were poured and one handed to each of the 3 original members of Team 7. As soon as the alcohol hit their stomach, all 3 of them could immediately feel it take effect. Thankfully, Naruto had Kurama on his side to neutralize most of the alcohol. Normally, the giant furball of a fox would have let Naruto deal with the alcohol on his own, however he wanted to make sure his vessel was conscious to see the Uchiha drunk off his A. Sakura activated a medical jutsu she had been taught by Tsunade to help clear some of the alcohol in her system, but the fire sake was still too strong for the jutsu to be fully effective. Still, she was able to remain somewhat sober. Sasuke on the other hand. The effects of the sake were almost immediate as the Uchiha's pupils began to dilate and a blush seeped over Sasuke's face. "Hey Sakura, where'd your sisters go?" asked the obviously drunk Sasuke. "Sisters?" asked a confused Sakura. Sasuke continued to ramble on about Sakura and her sisters, who everyone guessed had something to do with the cake incident that happened not too long ago. It then eventually got to the point where Sasuke thought Sakura was her sister. Unfortunately, things wouldn't remain that simple as eventually Sakura accidentally knocked the bottle of fire sake off the table while she was trying to get the overly flirty Sasuke off of her, which wouldn't have been bad if it wasn't for the whole sister thing cursed at Konohamaru. The bottle didn't simply get knocked over and spilled, rather it was sent flying across the table directly towards a certain bushy-browed Chunin, causing the end of the bottle to land directly in his mouth. Everyone watched on in horror as Lee gulped down the sake and it didn't take long at all for the alcohol to take effect. By the time the bottle dropped out of Lee's mouth, he was already looking at everyone present with heavy eyes. "Fad ya luin at," slurred Lee. Everyone who was aware of what was going on, gulped just before Lee suddenly sent the table flying through the wall of the building. Moments later, everyone had scattered, trying to avoid Lee's drunken fury, everyone except one. In a drunken state, Sasuke stood opposite of Lee, his Sharingan subconsciously activating. Lee, seeing this as a challenge, charged towards Sasuke before tripping over a small pebble in the road. Lee continued to tumble towards the Uchiha before coming to the point where he was spinning like a top while trying to kick Sasuke. A few more attacks by Lee later, Sasuke was beginning to look a bit beat up, but suddenly he began to attack Lee in a very drunken-like fashion, similar to Lee's Suiken. Did Sasuke just somehow manage to copy Lee's drunken fist? Asked a shocked Naruto from atop the building. Everyone who was aware of the destructive power of the Suiken paled. Indeed, in his own drunken state and with the aid of the Sharingan, Sasuke had somehow obtained the ability to use the Suiken and the two drunken brawlers were soon staggering and rolling their way throughout the block, without any regards for the destruction of property. The following morning, groaned Sasuke as he began to stir. His head was pounding hard, feeling like it was being hit repeatedly by Sakura's fist. Unfortunately, he had no idea where he was, but wherever he had fallen asleep after the previous night, it had a great view of the village. It also didn't appear to have any flaws as Sasuke couldn't feel anything underneath him. As he began to realize his situation, the Uchiha head began to panic. "Help!" was heard throughout the village that morning, and if anyone looked up towards the Hokage monument, they would see an Uchiha handing on one of the spikes of the Yondaime Hokage's hair by his shirt. How he got like that, no one really knows. The past night, an entire block of village property had been completely reduced to debris before Sasuke and Lee were finally restrained, and it only took about 300 of Naruto's clones, each. However, thanks to Naruto's labor, clones, the block was repaired in little to no time and it only cost the blonde 2 more bottles of his fire sake to convince Tsunade not to punish him too severely. The past night had cost Naruto 3 bottles in all of fire sake, but the sight of the high-strung Uchiha in the morning was well worth it. About a week later, Sasuke was still trying to adjust to his new status in Konoha. The various looks he was getting differed from person to person. Some saw him now as a clan head and as such treated him as such, others just treated him as the used to, but then there were those few who just wanted to take that sword he had strapped to the back of his waist and run him through with it. It was obvious these were the people who had a stake in his taking up the CRA. But there was also one other look that he was receiving, one that sent chills of fear down his spine. It wasn't until he passed a nearby newsstand that he finally realized what was happening. In the featured display of the stand was an article in Konoha's paper that read, "Uchiha Sasuke, named Konoha's most eligible bachelor, now seeks applicants for the restoration of his clan." Sasuke cursed a certain counselor who was a major player in Konoha's media. It appeared like they weren't going to let him slip from the grasp that easily. As Sasuke looked up from the newsstand, about a dozen or so girls, most of them his age who he immediately recognized as fangirls, were slowly creeping their way towards him, like a cat ready to pounce in its prey. Sasuke inched backwards as his personal space was quickly overwhelmed. All the fangirls were thinking the same thing. Today's the day I take Sasuke-kun as mine. Sasuke gulped as he felt any escape route see off as his back was now to a wall. I'm trapped. What I wouldn't give for one of Naruto's stupid pranks right about now, thought the Uchiha. It was then that he realized something. He was a shinobi. Walls were no barricade for a shinobi, and as the fangirls pounced on their prey, Sasuke shot up the wall as all the fangirls got was a face full of wooden plaster. From atop the rooftops, Sasuke let out a sigh of relief and made his way towards the safety of the Uchiha compound. Upon arriving at the compound, however, he nearly tumbled off the rooftop of a nearby building as the sight before him was almost too horrible to behold. The entire compound had been overrun with fangirls. Before any of them could notice the target of their lusting, Sasuke hightailed it away from the fangirls and his home, heading towards one of his refuges in this village. Naruto's apartment later that afternoon. Naruto had just finished up a rather intense training session and had returned to his apartment to clean up before he met up with Hinata, Neji, and Tenten for a double-date dinner. However, as he reached for the handle, he could sense a faint presence already in his house. Thinking it was an intruder, Naruto slowly and quietly drew his sword and opened the door. As he looked around the corner into his living room, he lowered his blade and confronted the intruder. While I normally wouldn't mind company, may I ask why you're in my apartment without my knowing? Surely you've got to have plenty of room back at your place, team, said Naruto. Oh, I've got room all right, but I've got a little pest infestation back at the Uchiha compound, said Sasuke as he threw Naruto the news article he picked up at the newsstand before he was attacked. Naruto took a quick look at the article and sighed. Sakura-chan's not going to like this, said Naruto. How bad is it? Let's just say more than your dad's K count in the last major war, said Sasuke. Naruto let out a whistle. Damn team. When I get my hands on that counselor who released that damn article, I'm going to make him wish he was being eaten by the furball in your stomach, growled Sasuke. Hey, the last time I ate a human was when two Kumo ninja tried to capture me, and let me tell you humans don't taste that good, objected Kurama as he momentarily took over control. Anyways, I don't suppose I could ask a favor from you? Asked Sasuke. Let me guess. You want me and my sealing expertise to put up a barrier seal around your compound that would essentially fangirl-proof the Uchiha compound, said Naruto. If you could, I'd owe you big, said Sasuke. I'll hold you to that, said Naruto. I'll see what I can do tomorrow. Now if you don't mind, I've got a date in 15 minutes. Dobe. Naruto made for his room but stopped in the hallway. That's right, Sakura-chan's on a mission. I suppose you need a place to crash for the night since you won't be able to crash with Sakura-chan. Sasuke nodded and Naruto sighed. Fine, just don't make a mess. The following day, Naruto set to fangirl-proofing the entire Uchiha compound, placing a rather intricate barrier seal around the perimeter that would only allow those with Uchiha B or friends of those with Uchiha B to pass. Anyone who wasn't on the list of those who could pass would be denied entry as well as being dyed a bright orange that wouldn't come out for a week regardless of how much you tried to wash it out. Sasuke wasn't too fond of the orange, but it did the trick at keeping the fangirls out of his home. A few days later. Begin. Neji and Hinata bolted at one another, Hinata quickly spinning out of the way of one of Neji's strikes. Coming behind Neji, Hinata struck at her cousin, but Neji was quick enough to turn and deflect his cousin's attack. From the side, Naruto sipped a cup of tea on the porch of the Hyuga house, observing the spar between the two cousins. He practically had an open invitation to come by whenever he wanted, and it was normal for him to come by for the Hyuga's morning spars if he had nothing better to do that day. As both cousins fought, Hiashi watched the two similar yet different styles. Neji was more direct and his strikes were more precise, whereas Hinata was more agile and swift with her attacks. Still, the two were showing their skills to be about equal as they were forced to disengage from one another. As the two prepared for another go, Hiashi stood up to stop them for a moment as an Anbu appeared in the compound. What is your business, Anbu-san? Asked Hiashi. Apologies for the interruption, Hyuga-sama, but Uzumaki-san's presence has been requested by the Hokage, said the Anbu. Hiashi looked over towards Naruto, who stood up and walked towards the Anbu. The Anbu then turned towards Neji and handed the Hyuga prodigy a small scroll. Hyuga Neji, your presence is requested for a mission briefing in an hour. Neji nodded and took the scroll. If you don't mind me asking, what does Barkan want? Asked Naruto. Hiashi sighed in defeat. He had been trying to break Naruto of calling the Hokage Barkan, especially in front of high-ranked ninja. It regards a certain Uzumaki Karen, responded the Anbu. Naruto's eyes instantly lit up. Nichan. Right, lead the way, Tabayo. Exclaimed Naruto. I'll see you later, Hinata-chan. Hinata smiled and waved as Naruto and the Anbu shunshined away. Moments later, Naruto opened the door to the Hokage's office to find Tsunade sitting at her desk and sending the blonde an irritated glare, the massive pile of paperwork as a result of their night a few days ago the main source of her frustration. Standing off to the side was Karen and Naruto could sense a few Anbu hidden throughout the room. Karen Nichan, chirped Naruto as he saw the redhead sitting in a chair in Tsunade's office. About time you showed up, said Tsunade. So what do you need me for anyways, Barkan? Asked Naruto, a tick mark appearing on Tsunade's forehead. Karen just looked at the exchange between the two and thought to herself. Barkan. But she looks no older than 30. Karen's officially being released from Anbu custody. Considering you're the closest thing she has to family and not to mention you'll be leading the clan she belongs to in a few months, as of today, she's your responsibility, said Tsunade. Our main worries about her and the reason we kept her detained for so long were because of her association to Orochimaru, and the last thing we needed was another Kabuto in our village. Karen involuntarily cringed at the mentioning of Kabuto. Anyways, she was fully cooperative with Ibiki and Inoiki, and she was actually able to provide us with some valuable information on some of Orochimaru's operations. I won't go into the details, but Anbu has just recently raided a few of his smaller bases throughout the Land of Fire, explained Tsunade. Karen here has agreed to join our shinobi forces, which will happen once I manage to arrange a team for her and our other new additions. New additions? Asked Naruto. Tsunade nodded. The two others rescued from the Land of the Sea, Hozuki Sugetsu and Isaribi, said Tsunade. A smile came upon Naruto's face. Does that mean Isaribi Nichan's going to be alright? Flashback. After being unconscious for a few weeks, Isaribi finally opened her eyes and awakened from the medically induced coma she was in. She had been sedated to undergo an operation, headed by Tsunade, to isolate the Kaima genes in her system. She was hopeful as Tsunade had ensured her that there was a good chance of success with the operation. Oh good, you're awake, called out a familiar voice as Isaribi turned to see Tsunade enter her hospital room. Tsunade-sama. Good morning Isaribi. Now, why don't we have a look at you, smiled Tsunade as she moved to remove the bandages that Isaribi had over her face, hiding the partial transformation. As the bandages were removed, the smile didn't leave Tsunade's face. It looks like the operation was a success, said Tsunade as she examined the scale-less skin on Isaribi's face and left arm. So those Kaima genes that Amaki guy gave me are gone? Asked Isaribi. At this, Tsunade sighed and shook her head. I'm sorry to say, but the Kaima genes are still in you, said Tsunade. Based on everything we gathered from the lab about you and the Kaima form, it seems as if the genes were originally yours. Amaki never gave them to you, the genes, he only managed to destabilize them through his various experiments. So what happened then? Asked Isaribi. What did you do if the genes weren't removed from me? Unlike the others who were experimented on, your Kaima genes are a part of you. What we did was stabilize the Kaima genes to the point where you'll be able to change between a normal human form and the Kaima form at will. In a way, you now have a bloodline that you can control. Tsunade looked over at Isaribi. The girl looked a bit disheartened upon hearing that she would never be rid of the Kaima genes. Don't worry. If you never want to use the Kaima form again, you don't have to. No, it's alright. At first, I was a little sad that you said the genes couldn't be removed from me, but if they really were mine to begin with, then I guess there's no reason to fret. I'm just a little sad and angry that Amaki used what was mine to make those people suffer like they did, said Isaribi. Don't worry about that. We were able to cure them as the genes weren't a part of the DNA like they were with you, but I understand where you're coming from. Orochimaru is like that, not caring about morals or one person's feelings so long as it entertains him, said Tsunade. But if it makes you feel any better, Orochimaru won't be able to use the Kaima genes anymore. Thanks Tsunade-sama, smiled Isaribi. End flashback. I see, said Naruto. Well, I'm glad to hear that she's going to be alright. Tsunade smiled and nodded. Hey Barkan, I was wondering if I could make a little trip here, said Naruto. Tsunade raised her eyebrow to inquire as to where the blonde wanted to go this time. I want to go back to Uzushiogakure, said Naruto. At this, Karen's head perked up. And I want to take Karen Nichan with me. You know I can't just let you leave the village, said Tsunade. And Karen is still under Anbu surveillance. I know, but I was the reason she was no longer useful to Orochimaru and the reason she got thrown into that prison. I was the one who locked her out of a zoo and the least I could do is go with her and allow her to get what's rightfully hers, said Naruto. Besides, if I'm going to re-establish the Uzumaki clan in Konoha, I might as well move the archives here. Now this, Tsunade began to think on. Naruto did have a point and moving the Uzumaki library to Konoha would only be of great benefit to Konoha. And it was his right to the knowledge in the library. Still, there was the Akatsuki to deal with, but given an appropriate escort along with the departing of the Niju Shotai here later this afternoon as an effort to combat Akatsuki, she figured now was probably the best time to allow Naruto to leave the village. Very well. Stop by tomorrow morning and I'll have arrangements made for the two of you, said Tsunade. A knock came on the door to Tsunade's office and Shizune stepped inside. Tsunade-sama, the ninja you requested have assembled on the roof of the tower. Naruto sensed the presence of a large number of shinobi on top of the tower. What's going on, Barkan? Our first major effort to combat the Akatsuki, responded Tsunade. On top of the tower. Tsunade arrived on top of the tower to see the Niju Shotai assembled in front of her, 20 teams of some of this village's finest ninja. Amongst these squads were Sarutobi Asuma, Nara Shikamaru, Kotetsu, and Isumo making up one squad and Meitogai, Hyuga-neji, Yukihaku, and Inuzuka Kiba making up another team. All of you are aware of an organization known as Akatsuki. Your objective is to locate these Akatsuki and capture them so that we can obtain intel on their objectives. Should capture prove to be impossible, eradicate them, announced Tsunade. They have been spotted just recently in the Land of Fire and may have moved into one of the bordering countries to the north. This is our best chance to capture them, but engage with caution, these guys are all dangerous. Dismissed. Yosh, shouted Guy. Meet at the north gate in 5 minutes. We will find these Akatsuki and show them just what our flames of youth can do. And with that, Guy departed. FFF 5 minutes. Gasped Kiba. Neji turned to the Inuzuka. That's Guy-sensei for you. Kiba turned to his canine partner. What did you say, Akamaru? ARF. Barked Akamaru. Hey, that's right. We'll find these Akatsuki freaks. After all, we are the best trackers in Konoha, boasted Kiba. Akatsuki hideout. All of Akatsuki was gathered on the fingertips of the Gedo Mazo, the blue phantom dragons suspending the corpse of Han in front of them before dropping the lifeless body to the ground. The sealing of the Gobi is complete, announced the ripple-eyed shadow. Kakazu, what is the status of your target? The Nanabi is nowhere to be found. It is nowhere in Takagakure. Either they are hiding it well or something must have happened that resulted in its death, said the shadow of Kakazu. Zetsu, the ripple-eyed figure called out. We'll find where the little bug scurried off to, Leader-sama, said W. Zetsu. The figure of the leader then turned to the rest of Akatsuki. Very well. Until then, what's the status on the other targets? Both Suna and Konoha are aware of our activity and have increased the defensive measures, spoke B. Zetsu. The Hachibi and Yonbi are also closely guarded by their villages. The Sanbi can wait and the seal on the Rokubi is proving rather difficult to remove before we can begin the extraction. Which leaves the Nibi, spoke the leader. If I'm not mistaken, that's your target, Hidden, said Kakazu. About F time. Jashin's been S for some S lately. Declared Hidden. Leader nodded to the zombie combo. Hidden, Kakazu, capture your target and bring it back to the base in the south of the Land of Hot Water for extraction, ordered the leader. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.